Welcome one and all to episode 13 of the How Good Is Your Overwatch League Team series. Today is going to be all about the Vancouver Titans. This franchise made a multitude of changes after a very unproductive year. Will their rebuild bear fruit? Or are they in for more of what we've seen the last 2 years? Let's highlight their offseason and see how their roster stacks up against the rest of the league. First up is their roster overhaul, and let's just call it how it is. The Titans didn't really lose much of anything here. There's not anything super value that was worth holding on to. You have Rolf and Dalton first off, who kind of had 2 years to prove themselves, but didn't do much of anything. I for one really liked Dalton, but I also understand that he wasn't really worth keeping around. When considering the tank line plus Fire and Linkser, it's pretty obvious that they were more so filler players on this roster. Maybe you could justify giving Teru another shot, but even that might be a stretch. The point I'm trying to make here is the entire roster put up numerous uninspiring performances, and I mean, let's just call it how it is, they went 1-15 for a reason. God bless those breadstick memes and content, am I right? A roster overhaul was desperately needed, so good job, Vancouver. And thankfully, what they got in return at least looks a bit more promising than anything we've seen basically the last 2 years. Now obviously, you gotta take all of this with a grain of salt, seeing as they were one of the bottom teams in the league, but progress is still progress. The Titans chose to load up their new roster with 7 faces. In their initial roster reveal, they gave us their only current tank, plus 2 supports and 2 DPS options, and those players go as follows. At tank, they decided to go with False. This Canadian native was known for his off-tank play in North American contenders, playing for teams such as Uprising Academy and American Tornado. He's had a fairly respectable presence within the Tier 2 scene the last couple of years, and it seemed like he did deserve a shot at the Overwatch League. I would say he didn't get as big of a spotlight as a bunch of other guys on that team, but he still was helpful nonetheless. He beats anything that Vancouver were working with last year as well, so I'd say that this should be seen as a potential upgrade. The only question now is if he can handle all the tank responsibilities on his own. More on that a bit later. For now, let's transition to Masa and Aztec. This is a very interesting potential backline. Masa is coming off a bounce-back year that saw him and the Atlanta Reign make the grand finals. His Lucio looked as good as ever, but he also showed improvements with the rest of his hero pool, which is arguably more important. His impact was noticeably greater than what we saw in 2020. Masa is genuinely a good person to try and take a risk on. It's tough to tell if he's going to be the same player this year, but who honestly cares? Masa still had a promising year nonetheless, and he demonstrates all of the qualities you want from a veteran main support. His comms and ult tracking should make the lives of his teammates a lot easier. Another cool quality about Masa is he'll likely feel comfortable out there no matter who his flex support partner is. From 2019 until the present, he has played with 3 different flex supports and has found success with all of them. Him and Aztec should get along just fine, especially if the latter ends up showing off his latent potential. Aztec never had much of a place on Toronto thanks to Lastro, but that doesn't mean that he's incapable. Aztec was a good player for WGS Phoenix and Korean contenders. There were maybe some things he could have improved upon, which could explain his benching in Toronto, but he still did show promise nonetheless. He seemed to have good awareness with Ana, a pretty well-rounded BAP, and decent mechanics on Zen. His Zen, in my opinion, could use a little work based on things like trans timings, but maybe the last couple of years have changed that. Either way, he's not a terrible prospect to take a chance on. To play devil's advocate though, he basically has no support experience at the Overwatch League level. It's unclear what he's capable of in a starting role. Maybe he could pop off with a lot of resources, but then again, maybe there's a reason that Toronto picked Lastro over him to begin with. He kind of feels like a coin flip. However, no matter what ends up happening, I think we can all agree that his upside is noticeably better than Rolf's. Aztec brings more of a mechanical prowess that you're looking for at the flex support position, and he's obviously more of a winner, so I would consider this to be a good replacement no matter what ends up happening. Now we can get into the most exciting aspect of the initial roster reveal, the DPS. Shockwave and Aspire are not superstars, but they've already shown off great talent at the Overwatch League level. Shockwave for what he did in his first stint on Vancouver, plus Philly for a little bit, and Aspire for his play in 2021. Regardless of how good they could actually become, you know what you're getting here. They're league proven and they're good players. And who's to say that they don't get even better from here? Anything is possible. These two alone are going to offer you so much hero coverage and carry potential. They might be one of the most underrated duos in the league. They're both hit scan and sniper extraordinaires, but Aspire is also a great tracer, and Shockwave can flex onto a couple of other things, like Echo for example. They're perfect options for a budget roster looking for good playmakers. Again, I don't really see either one of them being superstars, but it's still way better than what they were working with previously. Generally, the Titans' initial core looks pretty decent, but they weren't done there. They also added Skyrippa and Psycho to provide some extra flexibility both at support and DPS. Neither signing is what you'd consider to be noteworthy, but hey, Vancouver can use all the help they can get. Skyrippa likely fills in any holes in Aztec's game. Maybe Vancouver will prefer his hero pool depending on the situation. There's also a chance though that he straight up ends up becoming the starter. Aztec's synergy may not be as strong with the rest of the team. Or maybe they just want this guy on the roster for his backup in case there is a potential double flex support composition they need to use. There is nothing wrong with having a support rotation when everything around you is rather uncertain. The Titans made the right move. I'm not entirely sure if Skyrippa will be the answer they're looking for, but at least they're trying. It's not like they're bringing in some scrub. The dude played for British Hurricane. It's just a matter of how he stacks up with his competition now. In that case, I wouldn't say it's a great pickup, but not the worst either. And my thoughts are pretty much the same for Psycho. He's been a staple of EU contenders, especially during 2021. Him and Falcons Esport EU rose to the top. Recent success is what you're looking for, so this is a good first step. The thing is, though, it's doubtful if he actually ends up being the Lord and Savior that Vancouver needs. If anything, he might be more of a secondary option, seeing as Shockwave Aspire is likely the more ideal duo. What he could do, though, is play all the things that Aspire and Shockwave can't. Projectile he has covered. Things like Mei and Doom are all things that he can play perfectly fine. He's generally a good plan B to have. His hero pool looks and feels a little niche, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a lot of action, especially on those control maps. You can more so get away with running the things he's good at, like Doom, Mei, and Pharah on control. I think that makes sense, right? And if necessary, he could also play Echo. Again, he's not some jaw-dropping talent, but he does fill out your needs while not being a horrible option. So yeah, not too shabby. That just about sums up your new Vancouver roster though. Of all the teams that feel like they should be bottom tier-ish, this is the one I have the most confidence in to surpass their expectations. The mix of deadly playmakers, high potential talent, and league veterans is appealing on paper. I'm telling you, that DPS line could cause some trouble. Aspire and Shockwave playing off each other sounds fantastic. I can see so many different metas where these two end up thriving. Even some of the tougher teams in the Western Conference could have trouble dealing with these two. They may be able to will their team to a couple of victories all on their own. They've shown skill in recent years, despite being forced into sudden situations that may not be very familiar, where all the pressure in the world is on them to make a difference. I generally still see them as bottom half of the league level, but they might have what it takes to be at the top of that list. In spite of that, I very much look forward to watching them be full-time contributors no matter the outcome. How about the rest of the team though? Is it reasonable to expect them to hold their own? The DPS line is by no means god tier. They need help. They need other guys who can make a difference, and I'm not really sure if the Titans have anybody else who can step up to the plate like that on a consistent basis. I wouldn't be surprised if Masa could, but main support is commonly regarded as one of the least impactful positions in the game, so he really can only do so much, and there's a good chance that his play is also going to see a drop-off, seeing as he's going from a title contender to a potential bottom feeder. But that's fine. He's not the big guy who needs to step up anyway. My eyes are more so on the tank and flex support spots. How much can False do as the only tank on the roster? Off-tank metas, yeah, he should be fine, but that only accounts for a fraction of the tanks in the game. I respect False and all, but he's got to show me that he can do it on the other tanks before I am willing to call him a consistently reliable starter. He's a bright and skillful individual who could be very good, but I don't believe that it is fair to expect him to transition without any issues. And it's not just limited to hero pool concerns. He has it especially rough compared to some of those other rosters with a single tank. He doesn't have the backup that your Smurfs and Piggies of the world have. He has a much harder job, and I fear he's just not going to get the help that he needs. Having to cover every hero at your role by yourself as a guy who only played off-tank his whole career is a difficult task, especially because he is just a rookie who may not have the right support system. And what about flex support? Can a decent player from EU contenders and a man who's been benched for the last year conquer a deadly North American region? Aztec might be decent. He's already found success at a high level thanks to his Tier 2 days, and while that definitely does warrant a fair chance at the league, it might already be too late for him. He got benched for an entire year, showing that he clearly was not ready to be star material. You know who he kind of reminds me of in a way? Repel. He had to wait a whole year to get his opportunity, and it came through the exact same occasion, a contract offer from a just meh team that is requiring him to speak English. Aztec genuinely might feel more confident in his abilities with a fresh start, but I still can't help but feel like he got benched for a reason in Toronto. Aztec was on Toronto before Lastro even joined, keep that in mind. Management opted to sign Lastro 3 months after initial scrims and tryouts and whatnot. I really want to believe in Aztec, but this kind of thought process makes it difficult. He has so much to prove, and he's playing against some true gods at flex support. I have high hopes for him because of the WGS days, but I'm also kind of not very optimistic at the same time. And let's face it, I don't think any of us feel much better about Skyripper. There's always a chance that he could become the next, Khan or something like that, but that might just be wishful thinking. Just in terms of improvement, the Titans clearly are stronger at support than they were before, but compared to the league average, it still may not be enough. Vancouver lack the consistent playmakers outside of DPS and possibly Masa. On the bright side, it's cool to know that they do have some strong points this year. That kind of already gives the Titans a shot to finish higher than they did last year. Just having a couple of places where you feel confident is going to make it more likely that you win some games. The only thing is, I don't know how much higher they can go in their current state. Between the uncertainty at flex support and the crazy pressure being put on Fulse, I'd venture to say not far. And let's not forget that they really don't have any superstars by any stretch. In my personal opinion, Vancouver are in that London and Florida situation where they just don't have enough juice to compete. I'm going to predict that the Titans finish as low as 19th and as high as 14th in the overall standings, with their Western outlook being 13th through 9th. Despite being put in the same tier as those other guys, I do in fact believe that their ceiling is slightly higher. If it means anything for the Vancouver fans watching, I do not foresee this team coming in last this year. They might not have the all-star talent needed to make a playoff run, but their ceiling is decent for a low-tier roster. All it takes is for Fulse to prove himself and the support line to play up to their potential. If they manage to meet those two benchmarks, they could be one of the best lower-tier rosters in the Overwatch League. It feels unlikely, but if the Titans do manage to click, they might give some of the decent teams in the West some trouble. Through a small chance and a little luck, they do have a chance to finish higher than 4 other NA teams. I would like nothing more than for Vancouver to finally show some progress in their rebuild. This is the best opportunity they've had in years, arguably. But just remember, at the end of the day, it's a small chance. If they reach the peak of my projections, then literally everything in the world goes in their favor. And even then, they're still nowhere near special. Unfortunately for Vancouver fans, the playoff drought and bottom half of the standings trend is looking to continue. Improvements or not, they'd be lucky to finish better than bottom 3 in the West. I'd love to see them improve and end up proving me wrong for that matter, but that's currently how I'm feeling. Things do not look all that great. And now I'd like to turn things over to all of you watching this video. Do you believe the Titans have some potential this year? Or are the breadsticks memes going to have to save the day yet again? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to like this video and subscribe if you enjoyed today's discussion. And as always, thank you all so much for watching, I really appreciate your support, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.